The uninvited wedding. It was a Saturday morning in late spring, the kind where the air carried just enough warmth to make a cup of coffee on the porch feel like a small luxury. I'd been looking forward to it all week, nothing on the agenda, just me, my brew, and the quiet hum of my suburban neighborhood in Willow Creek. My name's Emily Carter, a 38-year-old graphic designer who'd settled into this tidy little corner of the world 5 years ago. I liked my routines, my solitude, and my backyard, a sprawling patch of green framed by a sturdy oak tree and dotted with quirky lawn ornaments I'd collected over the years. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Or so I thought. I stepped onto the porch that morning, barefoot, cradling my mug, and froze mid-sip. My backyard wasn't my backyard anymore. Overnight, it had morphed into something out of a bridal magazine. Rows of white folding chairs stretched across the grass, their neat alignment mocking my usual chaos of garden tools and mismatched patio furniture. At the center stood an arch draped in roses and ivy, elegant enough to make my plastic flamingos look like a bad joke. A string quartet, yes, a quartet, sat off to the side, their bows gliding over strings in a soft rendition of Pachelbel's canon. And then there were the people, dozens of them, dressed in crisp suits and flowing dresses, sipping champagne from fluted glasses as if they'd been invited to some exclusive garden party. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, took another look. Nope, still there. My brain scrambled to catch up, like a computer rebooting after a crash. Was I dreaming? Had I accidentally signed up for some reality TV show? I pinched my arm. Ouch, real, and scanned the scene again, trying to make sense of it. That's when I saw her, standing by a buffet table laden with pastries and fruit, basking in the glow of her own self-importance, was the one person I'd spent years avoiding, Margaret Hensley, president of the Willow Creek Homeowners Association. Margaret was the kind of woman who turned community into a four-letter word. She'd been HOA president for as long as anyone could remember, ruling over our cul-de-sacs and manicured lawns with the zeal of a medieval lord. She was in her mid-50s, always impeccably dressed, today in a pastel blazer and pearls, and carried an air of entitlement that could choke you from 10 feet away. We'd clashed before, mostly over my tacky lawn decor, her words, not mine. But this was a whole new level of audacity. My blood turned to lava. I set my coffee down, carefully, because smashing it would have been too dramatic even for this, and marched across the porch, down the steps, and straight toward her. The grass felt cool under my feet, a stark contrast to the heat rising in my chest. Guests parted like the Red Sea, their chatter faltering as they sensed a storm brewing. Margaret turned just as I reached her, her lips curling into a smile so sugary it could have given me cavities. "Oh, good morning, Emily dear," she chirped, her voice dripping with fake warmth. "I was wondering when you'd come out to join us." "Join you?" I snapped, my voice loud enough to make the violinist miss a note. "Margaret, what the hell is going on? Why is there a wedding in my backyard?" She waved a dismissive hand, as if I'd asked something as trivial as why the sun was shining. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. We needed a venue, and your yard was just sitting there, empty. It's the perfect space." I gaped at her, words failing me for a moment. "Are you kidding me? You didn't even ask. This is trespassing. How did you even set this up?" Margaret sipped her champagne, unfazed. "It was simple, really. We've been planning it for weeks. I gave the vendors your gate code, and a few of us came in yesterday evening to set up. Honestly, Emily, you should be thanking me. Your backyard looks stunning, far better than those hideous gnomes you insist on keeping." My jaw dropped so low I could have tripped over it. She'd used my gate code, my private gate code, to let strangers onto my property. She'd planned this for weeks without a word to me. And now she was insulting my gnomes? I glanced around, taking in the full scope of the invasion. There wasn't just chairs and an arch. There was a catering station with silver chafing dishes, a bar with a bartender mixing cocktails, and a small stage where the quartet played. It was a full-blown wedding, and I hadn't been invited to my own damn yard. "Margaret," I said, my voice trembling with barely contained fury, "I don't even know these people. You didn't just set up chairs. You've got a whole reception going on my property, without my permission." She sighed, as if I were a child throwing a tantrum. "It's for the benefit of the community, Emily. The bride is my niece, and her parents' yard wasn't big enough. So, being the generous person I am, I offered a solution. You should be honored to host such a lovely event. Honored. I nearly choked. Honored to have my privacy violated? To wake up to a circus I didn't sign up for? Oh, please, she said, rolling her eyes. It's just for a few hours. Besides, you never use your backyard. It's practically wasted space. That was it. The final straw. I looked around at the guests, laughing, clinking glasses, posing for photos by my oak tree like it was some rented venue, and felt a rage so pure it could have powered a city. Margaret stood there, smug and oblivious, as if she'd done me a favor. I took a deep breath, clenching my fists until my nails dug into my palms. All right, Margaret, I said, my voice low and steady. You have exactly 5 minutes to get everyone out before I call the cops. Her expression flickered, just for a second, before she laughed, a high, condescending sound that grated on my nerves. Oh, don't be ridiculous. You wouldn't ruin a wedding over something so small. I pulled out my phone. Watch me. She scoffed, her confidence barely wavering. By the time they arrive, the wedding will be nearly over anyway. And do you really want to be the villain who ruined my niece's special day? I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip the buffet table and send her precious champagne flutes shattering to the ground. But I knew Margaret too well. She thrived on manipulation, on pushing people until they gave up. If I called the cops now, the wedding would drag on, and she'd spin it into a sob story about how heartless I was. No, I wouldn't play her game. I'd beat her at it. Fine, I said, pocketing my phone. Enjoy your little party, Margaret. But this isn't over. She smirked, thinking she'd won. She had no idea what was coming. The wedding dragged on for hours. I stayed inside, peering through my blinds like a prisoner in my own home, watching as Margaret flitted from guest to guest, accepting compliments on her venue. The bride and groom, strangers to me, cut a cake under my oak tree, their laughter echoing through the windows. By dusk, the last of the guests trickled out, leaving behind a wreckage of crumpled napkins, spilled drinks, and trampled grass. Margaret didn't even offer to clean up. She just waved goodbye from my driveway, her niece's arm linked with hers, as if she'd pulled off the event of the year. I spent the evening hauling trash bags to the curb, scrubbing sticky champagne stains off my patio, and cursing under my breath. My backyard, my sanctuary, had been hijacked, and for what? Margaret's ego? Her niece's Instagram photos? The entitlement gnawed at me, a splinter I couldn't pull out. She'd crossed a line, and I wasn't about to let it slide. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, an idea took root. If Margaret thought my yard was free real estate for her events, then fine, I'd turn it into an event space. But not the kind she'd approve of. I needed something loud, chaotic, and guaranteed to make her pristine suburban world implode. Something that would hit her where it hurt, her obsession with appearances. The next morning, I grabbed my laptop and started digging. Willow Creek was a sleepy place, but it wasn't far from a rougher-edge town where a local motorcycle club, the Iron Wolves, had a reputation. They weren't criminals, mostly ex-vets and blue-collar guys who loved their bikes. But they were loud, rowdy, and the polar opposite of Margaret's HOA-approved aesthetic. I'd heard they'd been kicked out of their last rally spot after a noise complaint. Perfect. I found their website, surprisingly professional for a biker crew, and dialed the contact number. A gruff voice answered after 2 rings. Iron Wolves MC. This is Jack. Hey, Jack, I said, leaning back in my chair. I heard you guys are looking for a place to host your next gathering. How do you feel about a big, open backyard in the middle of a very uptight neighborhood? There was a pause, then a low chuckle. You serious? Dead serious. What's the catch? No catch, I said, grinning. Just a personal vendetta against an HOA president who thinks she can use my property without permission. If you're up for some loud music, a good time, and a little petty revenge, I'm happy to host. Silence again, then a full-on laugh, deep and hearty. Oh, this I gotta see. Count us in. Perfect, I said. I'll send you the details. Bring your loudest bikes. We set the date for 3 days later. Coincidentally, the same morning Margaret's weekly HOA meeting was scheduled at her house. She'd be sipping tea with her cronies, plotting new ways to find people for uneven hedges when the Iron Wolves rolled in. I could already picture her face, and it fueled me through the next few days as I prepped. I didn't tell a soul. Not my neighbors, not my friends, nobody. I wanted the shock factor, the sheer chaos of it, to hit Margaret like a freight train. I cleared space in my driveway, stocked up on snacks, because bikers probably liked snacks, right? And waited. By Friday night, I was buzzing with anticipation, barely sleeping as I imagined the rumble of engines tearing through Willow Creek's quiet streets. Saturday dawned bright and clear. I was up early, coffee in hand, when the first distant growl sounded. It started low, like a storm brewing on the horizon, then swelled into a chorus of throaty roars. I stepped onto my porch just as the iron wolves appeared, nearly 40 bikes in a staggered formation, chrome gleaming under the sun, leather-clad riders looking like they'd ridden straight out of a movie. At the front was Jack Blade Russo, the club president, a burly guy with a grizzled beard and a presence that screamed, "Don't mess with me." They pulled into my driveway, engines cutting off one by one. Blade swung off his bike, surveyed my yard, and nodded. "Nice setup. Roomy. Good space for a gathering." "Morning, gentlemen," I said, grinning. "Welcome to Willow Creek." That's when Margaret appeared. She stormed down the sidewalk from her house, teacup still in hand, her face a shade of red I'd never seen before. "What is going on here?" she shrieked, her voice piercing the morning air. I sipped my coffee, casual as could be. "Oh, didn't you hear? I decided to rent out my backyard." "Just like you did." This is not the same thing," she sputtered, eyes darting from the bikers to me. "Oh, but it is," I said, feigning innocence. "You showed me that under HOA rules, as long as there's no permanent modifications, events can be hosted freely. That was your defense for the wedding, right?" So I thought, why not? It's for the community. Margaret stared at Blade, who stared back, completely unbothered. "This is unacceptable," she screeched. These people can't set up a motorcycle rally in the middle of a peaceful neighborhood." I shrugged. "Why not? It's just for a couple days. Community spirit and all that." One of the bikers, a guy with a shaved head and a skull tattoo, called out, "Hey, boss, where do we set up the barbecue pit?" Margaret's mouth dropped open. "A barbecue pit?" "Oh, yeah," I said, nodding. "We've got a whole weekend planned. Barbecue, live music, maybe some fireworks. Good old-fashioned fun." She turned, eyes wild, looking for backup. A few HOA members peeked out their windows, horrified but unwilling to intervene. Margaret was on her own, and she knew it. "This will not stand," she hissed. "I'm calling the police." "Go ahead," I said. "I cleared it with the city. Permits are in order, noise levels are legal, fire regs are met. Oh, and the Iron Wolves do charity events all the time. Did you know that?" Her fists clenched, knuckles white. "You think this is funny?" I gave her my widest, most satisfied smile. "Margaret, I think this is hilarious." The Iron Wolves didn't waste time. Within an hour, my backyard was a hive of activity. Lawn chairs unfolded, grills fired up, and a makeshift beer station set up near the oak tree. Rock music blared from a portable speaker, loud enough to rattle Margaret's nerves, but just under the legal limit. The smell of ribs and burgers wafted through the air, a delicious middle finger to her aesthetic pollution complaints. I sat on my porch, watching it all unfold, feeling like a general who'd just launched a flawless ambush. Margaret didn't take it lying down. She assembled her HOA posse on her front lawn, 5 of her most loyal minions, clutching clipboards and whispering like they were planning a coup. I could almost hear her. "We have to stop this. He's not breaking any rules. There must be some way." Their first move was predictable, a noise complaint. 2 cops showed up around noon, but after a quick chat with me and a glance at my permits, they left, one of them even grabbing a burger on his way out. Next came the violation notices, letters stuffed in my mailbox citing obscure rules. Unapproved outdoor seating, excessive vehicle presence, the bikes in my driveway, disruption of neighborhood harmony. I shredded them without a second thought. Margaret wasn't fighting with facts, she was flailing. By afternoon, she escalated. She marched into my yard, arms crossed, and tried to lecture the bikers. "You people are causing a disturbance," she barked. "This is a family neighborhood." A biker named Tara, 6 feet of muscle and attitude, crossed her arms and smirked. "Funny, seems like the only one disturbed is you." Margaret sputtered, but before she could retort, one of the biker wives stepped in, all sweetness. "Oh, honey, maybe if you weren't so rude, we'd offer you some ribs." Margaret turned on her heel and stormed off, fuming. I watched from my porch, sipping a beer Blade had handed me, and laughed until my sides hurt. The next 24 hours were pure gold. The Iron Wolves weren't just loud, they were likable. Kids wandered over, eyes wide at the bikes. Elderly neighbors, usually too scared of Margaret to breathe wrong, chatted with the bikers over lemonade. One guy even fixed Mrs. Larson's fence, winning her over completely. Margaret's next move was desperate. She called in a city inspector, claiming structural hazards on my property. The guy poked around, found nothing, and left, though not before I saw Margaret smirking from her window, thinking she'd scored a point. She hadn't. The bikers, meanwhile, took it up a notch. Blade suggested a charity event, free motorcycle rides for kids, with permission, a cookout for a veterans fund, and handyman help for anyone who needed it. By Sunday, the neighborhood was buzzing with goodwill. People who'd cursed the rally on Saturday were now posing for photos with the Wolves. Margaret's grip was slipping, and she knew it. Monday morning, Margaret played her trump card. I woke to sirens, 3 cop cars this time, lights flashing. She'd filed a report claiming the Iron Wolves were dealing drugs and vandalizing property. I stepped outside, heart pounding, as officers swarmed my yard. Margaret watched from her porch, phone in hand, practically giddy. But she'd miscalculated. The Wolves were clean, ex-military, firefighters, mechanics with spotless records. The cops searched, found nothing but grills and beer, and started asking questions. One officer recognized Blade from a charity ride. "Hey, aren't you the guy who raises money for fallen officers?" "That's me," Blade said, calm as ever. The cops left, but not before digging into the report. Turns out Margaret had a history of exaggerated complaints. Neighbors she'd fined into submission, petty grudges turned into emergencies. This time, she'd crossed a line. Filing a false police report was illegal. Tuesday morning, 2 officers knocked on her door. She wasn't arrested, but they fined her and warned her to knock it off. I watched from my porch as her face crumpled, her allies scattering like rats. The HOA was fracturing, people whispered about her leadership, and a petition to oust her started circulating. She'd overplayed her hand, and I was winning. The petition gained steam fast. By Wednesday, half the neighborhood had signed it, fed up with years of Margaret's tyranny. She called an emergency HOA meeting that night, a last-ditch effort to save her throne. The clubhouse was packed, tension thick as she took the podium. "Our community is under threat," she began, voice trembling with forced authority. "Certain individuals are exploiting our rules, disrupting our peace." "You mean you got caught, old mister?" Thompson interrupted. "You lied to the cops and got fined." The room erupted. Mrs. Patel called out the wedding. Someone else mentioned the garden hose fine. Margaret floundered, her excuses drowned by booze. A vote was called, hands shot up, and she was out. She stormed off, defeated, as the crowd cheered. Within a week, the HOA was overhauled. I ran for a board seat and won, pushing through an amendment banning unauthorized property use. Margaret moved away a month later, her reign over. The Iron Wolves came back for a community barbecue, invited this time, and Blade handed me an honorary patch. I'd never been a biker, but I'd earned my stripes. Willow Creek changed after that. Neighbors relaxed, rules loosened, and the HOA became a force for good. The Wolves' annual barbecue became a tradition, a reminder of the day we toppled a tyrant. I kept my gnomes, my yard, my peace, and a patch that said I'd fought and won. Was I justified? Margaret trespassed, lied, and bullied. She got what she deserved. What do you think?